Hi, this is Steve Hargadon, and welcome to EdTech Live. This interview with Bill Fitzgerald of Funny Monkey was recorded on Friday, December 1st, 2006. Please visit edtechlive.com for more interviews, for information on our upcoming Drupal, Moodle, and Web 2.0 workshops in Philadelphia, and for links to EduBloggerCon, the 2007 gathering of educational bloggers in Atlanta, Georgia. So, Bill, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself first, and then a little bit about what you're doing specifically with Drupal.
Okay. Well, I've been working as an educator, actually as an English and a history teacher for last 16 years. For about the last decade, I've also had a variety of technology responsibilities, which have included working as a technology director at the high school level. So that's helped shape my approach to using technology within schools, and also helped kind of shape what I understand about the potential for using technology within schools. Right now, we're working on a few different things with Drupal and education, but really the three or four biggest obstacles we're tackling right now is first working on setting up a distribution of Drupal that's simple to install and comes configured so it's just flat out easy to use out of the box. And this distribution would meet the needs of classroom teachers and also schools that wanted to manage courses within Drupal. We're also doing some work on making Drupal kind of a clean and easy option for an intranet within a school. So basically, every user within the school or within a district would have a personal workspace within Drupal where they could have links to all their online courses if they were doing that, but also stored their work and generate a portfolio out of that. Underneath this all, we're working on some methods of single sign-on between these different applications, and we're working with a few people doing some OpenID development to support this. We've been talking with a local company, Jan Rain, local to me in Portland, Oregon, Jan Rain, and they are an OpenID development company. They've done a fair amount of work on a few different projects, including the VeriSign work. I've also been working with a guy, Kevin Jardine, who's in Europe. He's written some really nice OpenID code for a variety of different applications, including Moodle. And also, we've had some talks with the Bright folks up in Canada, in Vancouver, and they also have some OpenID code that they have helped get out there, and that'll allow for single sign-on between all the apps. The other piece that we're doing involves connecting some of the dots on a virtual research environment, which would allow people to, again, basically similar to the personal workspace, would expand that out into a research environment, would allow for online publication and sharing of research.
So let's step back just a bit, and because I think I understood about a half of what you said, and my guess is that many of our listeners are going to feel like they understood even less. So let's step back a minute and let's describe what Drupal is. It is obviously an open source program. You might tell us a little bit about its background.
Okay.
And then you and I came up the other day with a description of Drupal.
Yes.
And I'm wondering if it stood the test of time at all, and how are you describing it now? What are you saying to people about what Drupal is?
Well, yeah. Let me. I'm actually flipping through my notebook to see where
I
that
can
is.
tell you what we said.
Actually, yeah, that would be great because
we said. Go ahead.
Well, yeah, it is going to stand the test of time because it was the most succinct description that I've heard in a while, and I was actually kind of jealous that I wasn't able to say that myself.
Well, so as you described Drupal to me and its functionality, I said that Drupal was bringing the functionality of the read-write web into a controlled school environment.
Yeah, and that's and
obviously not its only use.
Yeah. And that's actually that's a great way of describing one aspect of what Drupal can do, and that very concise sentence illustrates simultaneously Drupal's biggest strength as an application, and in some ways the biggest obstacle in helping people to understand exactly what it can or can't do, because Drupal will do exactly what you said. It'll bring the read-write web into a classroom and into a school in a safe and secure way. And a well-designed Drupal site will eliminate the need for a teacher to set their students up on a Blogger account, go to blog lines and syndicate all those feeds, and then try and figure out some way to actually assess what kids are doing, and in the process, track. I mean, I shudder to think of what a teacher's time would look like if they have even 50 kids blogging and trying to track and monitor each of those using blog lines. It's time consuming. Whereas within a Drupal site, you can all of your information is right there. If you want to create a feed for teachers, I'm sorry, if a teacher wants to create a feed to have kids read, again, somebody studying Africa, you want to bring in BBC World News, you just bring it right into the site. So when a kid logs in to write up their daily blog, they can check the feed. It's all there in one place. So yeah, I mean, as you said, like, it brings the read-write web into the classroom in a very secure and very controlled and also very flexible way. But, and this is where it starts to get difficult, it can do so much more. So that's where, the question, when somebody asks what can Drupal do, or what is Drupal, it's such a wide open question, because I haven't seen an application of similar flexibility out there in either the open source or actually the proprietary world. It's a very flexible platform for developing functionality.
So let's step back even further.
Yep.
Let's use the language of construction, which Doug Searles pointed out is often used to describe what takes place on the internet.
Yep.
So let's say, could we say that Drupal is like a set of tools that can be used to build a website?
Yes.
And I look at Drupal's the description of what Drupal can do on the website, and I feel like I've walked into a hardware store, and there are all these tools, and they're saying you can use all these tools to build a website, like building a home.
Yeah.
And I feel a little bit like I'm out of my league.
Well, and that's not an uncommon experience. I mean, when I first got into Drupal, it took me a good, until I started setting up test sites. This was a couple of years ago, but until I started actually setting up test sites, and more importantly, breaking those test sites, I was having a hard time understanding exactly what I could or couldn't do. And through the experience of really teaching myself and reading through the forums, essentially of studying the app, I was able to learn some of the basics on how to structure a site. And once I had that, it was a much easier time kind of learning more nuanced approaches. But yeah, it really is. I mean, because a lot of people have heard about the power and the flexibility of Drupal, they go to the site with the expectation that the heavens are gonna open up. They will hear beautiful music, and all will become clear. But it's kind of analogous to going to the hardware store, buying a nail gun and some boards and expecting you're going to be able to go home and build a house. I mean, it does take a little bit of study, and that's why I actually separate Drupal use into two distinct categories. One is the site administration piece that requires a level of expertise to set up, and the second piece, which is where most people, I think, should be interacting with it, and I think where most people, frankly, just want to interact with it, is actually just going and using it. Because the beauty of setting up a Drupal site, I might spend a few hours setting up a generic blog-based site. But when I introduce that site to kids, when I introduce that site to high school students or adults, they spend about 5 to 10 minutes getting their account set up, asking questions about how to create content on the site, and then they're done with it. It's because at that point they've stopped to think about how to work in the site, and they're just working. my most recent experience of this was a site I set up for some from pre-service training teachers who are working at a state university, and I was looking at the traffic on the traffic on the site at the posts right after I brought the site live for them, and it was funny. You could actually watch the shift in tone of the post because the first 1 to 2 days, people were a lot of the blog comments were, God, this is cool, I'm blogging, because these were largely first time bloggers, and you had some people asking about well, how do I categorize posts, how do I find things. But after about 2 days, those types of posts disappeared, and it was just people asking questions about their work, and that's been how the site's been used to this day. So they had that initial break-in period, but then once they got working, that's what they were doing. So a lot of people are off put by actually finding, by trying to figure out how to configure the site, which is why the big part of what we're doing is actually creating a distribution that'll bring a site live where nobody ever has to touch that.
So a good comparison maybe would be with Moodle.
Yes.
Moodle is fairly structured. Once you've looked at Moodle, you have a pretty good understanding of exactly what it can do and how it can do it.
Yeah.
And it is, for a teacher, there's some training involved, but they can figure it out and they can move forward.
Yes.
It seems to me that Drupal is a little bit of a step back from that, meaning it's a set of tools that can be used to create something like Moodle or something different than Moodle, but it's a little bit more of the resources to build that kind of a system.
Yeah, and it's that and it's that blend of functionality that I think can sometimes get in the way, because when people install a Drupal site with no configuration, it's a blank slate. But you can make a Drupal site as structured or even more structured than a Moodle site, because you have very granular control over the content that appears on your site. When I'm training teachers how to use Moodle, the bulk of my training involves teaching somebody how to use the different activities and what activities inspire what type of response. When I'm training teachers how to use Drupal, it's a different method, it's a different mindset, because again, Moodle is a course management system, Drupal is a content management system that's used for courses. I find that a Drupal site, you can actually do a lot more effective examination of process than within a Moodle site, because Drupal places an emphasis on content, it places an emphasis on what people say, and gives you tools to track that. Whereas I think the way a lot of people use Moodle, they use it more or less as a kind of sequential calendar-based organization. So student responses to assignments as opposed to student response to ideas. And a lot of people have trouble shifting that paradigm within a more structured environment.
So let's revise our statement a little. Could we say that Drupal is a set of tools for building a web solution that could bring the functionalities of the read-write web into a controlled school environment?
Yeah.
So then the person who's looking at Drupal probably has to be a person who would say, okay, I need to spend a little bit of time or some amount of time actually learning to use these tools. But once I do, then the benefit will be that I can pretty much build any kind of house that I want that has these functionalities in it.
Exactly.
So let's talk about what those functionalities are.
Yeah.
And maybe that will help to kind of round out a better sense of what it is that Drupal can actually do. Because what I'm hoping for as a promise is that blogging, aspects of the read-write web, other things that I would like to incorporate into my, I'm speaking as though I were a teacher or an administrator listening.
Yeah.
Things that I want to incorporate into my school site or into my e-learning environment. Let's find out what's there, and then I can say, oh, that's exactly what I would like to do. Yeah. So what are those modules or functionality?
Well, it really is a pretty wide open, pretty wide open field. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the public-facing web presence on for a school site, and work backwards from there. So first, you can use Drupal to build your your public facing web presence, which is basically the face of a school that somebody sees. Within that site, you can have a section for recent events. You can have a section for sporting events. You can have a section for curriculum information. Basically, you can break it down so you have all of the largely static pages that give the information that will be updated, a couple times a year, or generally over the summer as there are small policy shifts. So that's the first thing you could do. Then you could create a section on the site for your HR department where they have all the information that they need in order to you know you want to have a private place for your employees to get forms. You can keep that on the same website. You just hide that using access controls. You want to have a place where parents can go to download the contact information forms that they need to get. Parents want to find a teacher. All that information can be there. So the first use would really be, as a collection point for all the administrative information that a school needs to communicate to people interested in learning more about the school, but students and parents who need information from the school. And that's pretty traditional technology. And most people, when they think of Drupal, don't think of it. They think of it less as kind of meeting these traditional needs, but it fits there very comfortably and actually does a great job because the way access control is broken up in Drupal, you can make it so only select people have the ability to bring content live, and you can create a very hierarchical environment behind the scenes. So with that base, let's say you want to add a more interactive section to the site where you want to have, for example, teacher blogs coming from the classroom, or just teacher notices coming from the classroom. You can set up a section designed specifically for that and break out access control by teacher. So, for example, Mrs. Jones teaching first grade can't post into Mr. Edwards' second grade site. And each of these classrooms would have a specific site or a specific place that they could work into. And this could be as simple or as complex. It could be as simple as a teacher saying, well, this week we did this. A teacher could post photographs in there, or it could be as complex as a teacher going and actually posting prompts and having students respond to it. I mean, basically starting that online dialogue. What makes Drupal nice is that it has modules that allow you to segment the site out. So in the same website that holds this public-facing web presence, you can also create private areas for those teacher discussion or for those class discussions, where, in order to protect the privacy of the kids, those are off limits to both the public eye, but also even to other site members who haven't been granted access to that particular nook of the site. So you have several levels of access control that you can build in there to create kind of the nuanced access control that you really need to get public information out, but also protect kids' safety when you need and want to do that. That's one thing that's kind of controversial in the blogging world, because there are also people who say if it's not public online, it's not quote unquote real blogging, and that's.
Yeah, but we don't bring NBA players to play with our kids on the playground. So.
Yeah, I mean, and that's because on a pedagogical level, blogging. I see blogging as more about finding a voice than finding an audience, and there are other people who kind of see it more about finding an audience and just more or less assume the voice. But you can't really have the audience without the voice, and for some people, actually working in that kind of more close space is a good place to be. But the kind of getting back to your original question, like what can you do? This is just the start, because the other thing, I mean, you can have a full-on social bookmarking within a Drupal site. There are a few modules that do this. One of which was written by us. So you can you can have a lot of the functionality that you get from Delicious within a single Drupal install. You can do photo sharing within a Drupal site in the same way. You can set up photo galleries by user. Um, you can determine, which of these photos stay public, which stay private, all within your same site. Um, you can you can set up again private workspaces for individuals within this same site. Um, Actually, a module that we're actually going to be bringing live within the next, probably within about a week or so, that we actually developed this in conjunction with Lee Baber, and she's down doing some work down in Virginia. Um, and it's a module that lets you basically specify a series of sites to search. Um, so, for example, let's say you want to set up a tool to help kids study vocab. You can specify that you want to search dictionary.com and merriam-webster.com, m-w.com. So you set up that search string, and then you type in a series of words in a comma-separated list. So again, you type in the words, obscure, tremor, just your vocab list separated by commas. You hit submit, and it generates a series of links to look up all these words. If you take a step back, you can actually extrapolate that out, and you can have it search specific, sites that are specific to science or biology. You can also set it up to do image searches by searching Google Images. But this is something that exists within Drupal that doesn't exist anyplace else, and it's in kind of these kind of out of the box, you know, basically flexible solutions to common problems. That's the area where Drupal really excels, because one of the things that's really nice about working with this open source product is that basically if somebody says I'd like to do X, if you sit back and think about it, there's usually a way to do it. And that's when it's really nice to be able to tap into the community support and the collected knowledge of the core developers and the contributed module developers on Drupal, and just watch some really nice things start to happen.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about your background with open source.
My main background with open source has actually been working within the Drupal community. I'm relatively new to it. Actually the thing that I was aware of open source maybe 6-7 years ago, but I started learning about databases by using, of all things, Microsoft Access, which is is anathema in some parts, but that was how I got there. And I came to the open source community actually through my partner in Funny Monkey, a guy named Mark Porras, he's the guy that writes the code, a lot of the code for, well, all the code for Funny Monkey and a lot of the code for Open Academic. And he introduced me to it through a variety of apps, and then I found the Drupal community a couple of years ago when I was actually researching some solutions for our web presence for Funny Monkey, and I started working within open source at that point, and have really never looked back.
What's been attractive to you about it?
It's funny because when I initially started, I was not tightly wedded to an open source ethos. In large part, actually, I think because I hadn't yet fully understood exactly how closely it tied into my philosophy of education. The thing that I love about working in open source, and the thing that I love about working in open source with education, is like literally every day on the job, you have an example of collaboration leading to good results. And people like to stress the benefits of competition, and people also like to stress the and I think in some ways this is a very American trait, but we harken back to the kind of the myth of the rugged individual, and that's a very romantic notion. but it's not always borne out in everyday life because you know when when you're trying to work with an idea, there's a certain part of the work that has to take place alone. And for example, when I'm thinking about like an approach to the problem, like for example the vocab search tool that I just described. I mean, yeah, I thought about that and I kind of came up with that on my own. That was like an individual thing. But once I threw that idea out there within the open source community, I got feedback that made it a better tool. And once I actually saw that tool rendered in code, I realized a few things that I had missed. If I was an individual working alone, I never would have gotten that feedback. I never would have received that feedback because it would have been basically three or four of us sitting in a room getting this work done. Because I'm working in open source, I've had feedback from probably 60 people on this idea, and that's just the kind of group contribution you don't get anyplace else. And if you're open to that kind of feedback, and if you're actually really willing to hear where you've missed something and where you've overlooked, like where you've overlooked necessary details, you can gain a lot from it. And if you take that and translate that ethos into the classroom, often the hardest part about being in the classroom or really learning in any place is knowing when to talk and when to listen. Working in the open source community actually can help you appreciate both.
I think it's interesting how closely what you've just described for me is also paralleled in blogging.
Yeah.
That's one of the things I really like about blogging is that it's the same basic concept, just on the level of ideas.
Yep.
And I throw an idea out, and you respond to it and like it or improve it or don't like it, and ultimately it seems as though the end result is just so significantly better and more interesting.
Yeah.
Because it's informed by lots of different viewpoints.
Yeah, and that idea of creating an informed opinion and what exactly constitutes an informed opinion, I think it's a very necessary skill to teach. And one of the things that's nice about developing in that environment is that you actually there's I mean there's a nice connection between teaching critical thinking skills and teaching how to evaluate the merits of different arguments on a tool that has been created using exactly that same process. And there aren't a lot of students who, some students, quite frankly, could care less, and that's fine, and that's okay, and that's good, and that's normal. There are some students though who kind of when you sit down and you talk to them about it, and these conversations invariably occur outside of class. And sometimes actually, when a few of them will actually stumble onto one of my websites, and they'll actually kind of post a comment there or send me an email off the site, and some of these conversations will actually occur online. When they stop to think about it, it's just the kind of thing where you get one kid understanding kind of the beauty of that process. It's a lesson that really can't be taught in any other way, and that's it's one of the positives of really a process-oriented education.
And it certainly seems to come close to helping us develop a sense of self-learning.
Oh yeah.
And being motivated and excited to learn.
Yeah, and getting back to Drupal, like that's one of the things that I love about the platform as a learning platform, because you can create a site that has very hierarchical access controls, but within that site you can create levels that are very, very flat. So basically, students, you can create a section of the site where students have precisely the tools they need to be self-directed learners. And being a self-directed learner doesn't mean they need to be able to post news to the front page of the school website. But it does mean that if they find a link they want to save, they need to be able to save it and find it. If they have an idea that they want to share, they need to be able to share it. If they want to post a comment within that area, then they should be able to post it. And you can simultaneously have, the secure area of the site that collects all of these learner-centered tools. And that balance is, I think, one of the more intriguing things about using Drupal as a learning platform that I've found.
So from what you've described, I kind of come to the conclusion that the Drupal makes a lot of sense if I'm at a school or district level and I have responsibility for helping create such a system.
Yes.
Or I have the vision to create it. And then maybe what you're working on is the piece that's needed, which is some sort of pre-packaged versions of Drupal.
Yes.
That you can just install and say, I'm not really ready to put on the gloves and build from scratch, but I want these functionalities, and this basic subset of functionalities are available in a prepackaged version that does most of what I need.
Exactly.
So it sounds like you're on the right track.
I certainly hope so. I spent a lot of time on this.
So tell us a little bit about what's needed. Drupal obviously needs to be installed on a server.
Yes. Yeah, I mean, again, just like WordPress, just like Moodle, Drupal needs a web server to run. It'll run on just about any shared hosting account, most shared hosting accounts that are out there. My preference when I'm setting it up is a LAMP stack, basically Linux, Apache, MySQL, and PHP. The only things that are obviously critical on that are the the MySQL. Well, really the PHP. There are a few different databases supported. So, yeah, I mean you can install this pretty easily on any web server. So that's basically all you need to get started.
So a school does need a web server, or
Yes.
they need a hosting company that
Yes.
has a web server. And like Moodle and Mambo and Joomla, I've noticed that there are hosting companies that do specifically say, we'll host your website or your Drupal installation.
Yes.
Does Funny Monkey do that?
We do not do that yet. We've hosted some websites, and we're hosting websites for clients for whom we've developed. We're in the process of creating a partnership where we will be doing this, because we're a small shop right now. It's Mark and I doing the bulk of it, and we contract worked out out to, we have a body of about five people who do work for us on various projects depending on the needs of the project. We have people with different specialties, and depending on what we need, we use them. One of the decisions that we've made is that we really do want to focus on what we do best, which is meeting the needs of educational clients. We have the expertise to host in-house. I mean, it's something that I've done. It's something that Mark has done, but our preference at this point is to basically set up a solution that involves a hosting partner. And we handle the functionality, they handle the infrastructure, and that way everybody's doing what they do best. And I think using that model, we can offer people the best possible solutions. We're not ready to roll that out right now. Hopefully a month from now, I'll be giving a different answer to that question.
How does Drupal compare with Mambo or Joomla?
Mambo and Joomla, they're both very nice packages. And if you need to have a site up and fairly basically up and pretty quickly, and you need to have and the core needs will meet what you do, then Mambo and Joomla is probably the best way to go. If you're unsure of what your needs are and or have a little time to experiment, I think Drupal will reward the time, because there's a level of flexibility there that I have not seen in either Mambo or Joomla. with that said, I am biased in that I am a Drupal developer.
So some of us learn by doing, and some learn by reading books.
Yes.
Unfortunately, I tended to gravitate toward wanting something to read.
Yes.
I'm the kind of guy who'll sit down and read a manual from cover to cover, and then that gives me the comfort to go out and play and experiment.
Yeah.
For someone like me, what do I do?
There are, I believe, 3 good books out there. One was written by Robert Douglas, and I'm blanking on the name of this book. There's another book out there that I believe was published by Packet. I could be wrong on that. And there's a third book coming out that was written by the folks at Lullabot, and there actually was a recent post on Drupal.org about it. That I'm pretty excited to see. I haven't actually bought any of the other books because first off, I'm more of a learn by doing type of guy. And second, there really haven't been any questions I felt like a pressing need to answer. But I would recommend probably if you're looking for a book to get right now, I'd recommend the book by Robert Douglas. Because he's one of the core Drupal developers. That book is also available at Amazon. And if you search Drupal.org, you can find it there. His last name is spelled Douglass. And I'm sure if you searched basically Amazon for Drupal Douglas, you'd find his book. He's one of the core developers on Drupal and just does some real nice work with documentation. The other book that's coming out from the Lullabot folks is going to be out in April of 2007, and that's going to be another very nice resource. The folks from Lullabot have done some amazing work on. They've done some great core development, some great development on contributed modules, and they also have a series of podcasts explaining Drupal basics that people rave about.
So that's a good reference. Drupal Basics podcasts.
Yeah, and those are available on the Drupal website as well. If you again go to Google and just type in Lullabot podcast, and again Lullabot is spelled Lullabot. You'll get a hit from them on the first page.
So I'm looking at Amazon right now, and I see one called Building Online Communities with Drupal, PHP, BB, and WordPress.
That's Robert Douglas.
That's the Douglas book?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And Robert Douglas, Mike Little, and Jared W. Smith.
Yeah, I think Robert Douglas wrote the Drupal section. He might have had a hand in the others, but I'm not sure. And I know him primarily through his work on Drupal.
There's another one called Pro Drupal Development. John Van Dyke and Matt Westgate coming out in April. I wonder if that's the one.
Actually, that's the one from the John Van Dyke and Matt Westgate. Yeah.
I don't see the packed one here, and I know they have one.
And I'm on Drupal.org right now, and I'm going to do a quick search and see if I can find it. But that one came out a while back, and I can't speak to any of these books from personal experience. I can speak to Robert Douglas's credentials because I'm just familiar with I'm familiar with what he does. Actually, the guy who wrote the other book is David Mercer, and I'm looking at a link on But I'm looking at a link on it now. Yeah, it's gotten fairly good reviews by people within the Drupal community.
That's the packed book?
I believe it's packed. Yeah. Actually, there's a link to it right here.
Building Websites with Drupal by David Mercer.
Yeah. Actually, it is. It is packed.
And it's getting good reviews.
Actually, pretty good. I'm actually looking at a link on Dries Butier's website. He's the guy who founded Drupal. and it actually is still he's on Drupal sites. Basically, the people's user IDs indicate how long they've been with the site. So the lower the ID number, the earlier they become a member. And Dries' user ID is 1, which means that he's the guy who first brought the site live.
Well, the pack book actually turned out to be the first listing on Amazon. I just didn't have it scrolled all the way up.
Yeah.
And it looks like it's been well reviewed as well.
Okay. Yeah. Good. Yeah. I mean, and these are good. These are both people who've done great work. I'm just more familiar with what Robert Douglas has done.
And you're not going to the books to learn about it like me. So you have the advantage of sitting down and playing with it.
Well, and I mean, I mean that's more just my personal preference too. I mean, if I get stumped on something that I can't find anyplace else, then I'll look for it. But I'm just fortunate enough to be able to talk to Mark or talk to other people who can explain what's happening to me with the code, which then helps me understand what's happening on the screen.
Did you want to talk about Open Academic at all?
Well, yeah, I mean, Open Academic it's kind of it's developing as a project, and it originally started as a project to integrate a variety of open source applications, and that's still the focus of it. And one of the things, honestly, that we've struggled with is actually kind of how to differentiate what we do at Funny Monkey with what we do from Open Academic. Because, I mean, Funny Monkey only develops GPL code. I mean, we actually have never taken a client who didn't want to GPL their code. And we would really be hard pressed to imagine a situation where we would. So yeah, I mean, we are strictly open source developers, and given that Open Academic is an open source project working on integrating applications, and the people behind Open Academic are also the people behind Funny Monkey, they're pretty similar. But I think the what we're attempting to accomplish with Open Academic is kind of a clear vision on how to integrate applications as opposed to specifically academic, specifically Drupal within academia. And we're focusing on tying together Drupal, Moodle, and MediaWiki. And at the core is an OpenID server wrapped within Drupal. And we're looking at different options with tying together content in Moodle. But one of the other things that we've been looking at recently is also tying in video conferencing. And we've been looking at a few different platforms for doing this. Looked a little bit at WebHuddle, but also we're looking pretty closely at DimDim, which is they're in a late alpha, and they're going to be coming out with a more stable version in January. And it's a pretty nice application because it allows for both application and screen sharing among participants, and it has the version they have out now has it can handle up to 12 participants all sharing screen and audio. So you can you can do a fair amount with it. And when people talk about how to run a school during, I mean, one of the things that's come up recently, I think Alan November had something about this, and there's been some talk about the potential of a flu pandemic and how we would cope. And some people have basically been putting that in an educational context. Well, how would we continue school if we had to shut down schools due to a flu pandemic? Which is kind of, it's a fairly petrifying thought. But if you can actually take a step back from what that would look like, which is arguably difficult to do, but if you can take that step back and think, okay, well, how would we have some semblance of normalcy with regards to education? There are people who are trying to build out the distance education infrastructure necessary to maintain that. And I think that's the set of tools that Open Academic is working toward building. And obviously not specifically because of the flu pandemic, but the type of thing that would allow within one organization the distance learning of a Moodle, the content management and course management of a Drupal, the collaborative environment of a media wiki, down the road, screen sharing and collaborative apps of something like DimDim, or proprietary version is Illuminate, but build this with open source tools. Um, and really, actually, the single most exciting thing that we're doing with Open Academic that we're not doing at Funny Monkey involves cross-site searching and cross-site collaboration, because we've been looking into, and one of the prime movers on this has actually been Kevin Jardine. Um, One of the things we've been looking into is tying together content from a variety of different sites, so you can search these multiple sites from one location, and by setting up this mechanism, foster collaboration between schools. So essentially, each site generates a feed of content that can be federated and aggregated within a single location. And depending on your rights, you can sign, you can basically, you can opt in to be part of this collaborative environment. But once you do that, it actually, if you extend, the kind of the online intranet that we were talking about before, and look at that as a form of a social network, you have the capability of tying together and aggregating content between institutions that choose to opt in, and making it so not only can you take a class online, but you can actually meet people who are talking about similar things online, but you can do it all within a controlled and secure environment.
I think some people are going to be lost at this point.
Well, yeah, I mean, and it's yeah,
But it sounds great.
yeah, and one of the things that I find difficult about interviews like this is that I have a hard time anticipating ahead of time who the audience is going to be, and my preference is to always kind of give a little more, but the risk is, yeah, I mean, not knowing exactly who I'm talking to, I definitely think I run the risk of of boring people to death.
I think you're thinking ahead, and I think you're anticipating what the needs are going to be for that kind of integration. It will be very interesting to watch.
Well, yeah, I mean, and in some ways, yeah, I mean, Open Academic is more of the playground, whereas Funny Monkey is more into practical implementation.
I've noticed even in the last couple of weeks that there are some very exciting things happening where teachers are using Skype for students to communicate from one continent to another.
Yeah.
Say in a language class, or there's just some really fun examples of that. And I think the whole video conferencing, sharing technology is really going to be fascinating to watch. And compelling.
Well, and what yeah, I agree. Because I don't think we've even scratched the surface on this, and I mean, I'm definitely curious to see who was first to establish some best practices. Because I think, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of incredibly interesting stuff that can be done with this, and whether it's real-time video interaction or kind of sharing videos back and forth, where, I mean, conceivably, I mean, you could even use something like, well, I mean, you could use any server that serves video to do it, which these days obviously just brings YouTube into mind. But yeah, no, I think that there's some fascinating stuff being done. I mean, I just recently read about the work that Vicky Davis and Julie Lindsay are doing, with basically with the flat classroom wiki between, I think, Georgia and India. And actually, I read about Chris Kraft, who's doing something similar on basically with a class. And I don't know, actually, I don't know where his class is located, but he's in the States. He's collaborating with a classroom in Lima, Peru.
Isn't he in South Carolina?
Yeah, that's ringing a bell. I think so. Yeah.
Because didn't they find that there was a kid from North Carolina who was actually in that class?
Yeah. Yeah.
But those were the two I was thinking of.
Well, and I mean, and I think there's going to be a proliferation of work like this when people see the value that they can come up of it. They can come of it, and that's one of the things where the rubric developed by Julie Lindsay and Vicki Davis for their work. I think being able to tie what, as this conversation I think demonstrates, or at least my version of this conversation demonstrates, can be very abstract concepts into very practical learning goals. And people can see that, yes, you actually can measure process if you design the right rubric, that there's going to be a lot of applications for this. And again, getting back to Drupal, because, for better or for worse, all roads do lead back to Drupal. Drupal provides you a tool that you can use to both design the collaborative environment and design the rubric that evaluates it.
Well, this has been a lot of fun. Let's give a little bit of a plug for an upcoming workshop that you're doing.
Absolutely.
It's going to be in Philadelphia in the
31st
January
and the 1st.
31st and the 1st.
Yes.
Which is likely going to take place at Science and Leadership Academy.
Yep.
In Philadelphia, and there'll be more information coming out on my blog and probably yours about that.
Actually, yeah, definitely. I'm writing up a very specific curriculum because my goal for that is to develop a curriculum that lets classroom teachers walk in with a set of ideas and walk out with basically a set of tools, and if they choose to develop this in the workshop, actually a set of lessons that they can then implement the next day in their classroom. I'm not really a big fan of seminars that teach a series, basically teach kind of general overview type things, because I think a lot of people tend to give teachers general overview. If a teacher is choosing to come to something I'm running, I like to have basically a series of tools that they can then actually immediately apply in their classroom, because that's teachers have very little time, and if something saves them time, I think that's a good thing.
Well, good. And we'll post information about that at EdTechLive.
Absolutely.
.com, and as well, probably you'll be posting at funnymonkey.com.
Actually, yeah, I'll be putting that on funnymonkey.com and also on openacademic.org.
Awesome. Bill, thanks for taking the time. I'm very excited about Drupal.
Actually, Steve, thanks for having me.
I kind of want to dig in now and figure out all that it can do. Have a good weekend.
You too, Steve. Thank you very much.